So thank you all for joining for the Double Your Team Productivity, Increase Employee Retention event. I am so excited to talk to you about how neuroinclusive business strategies are proven to improve performance and increase profits. That can sound like a really big and broad topic, but I know that we also are looking for some of those quick tip techniques, and we're going to throw those in today as well. So throughout the next hour, there will be 3 times when you see this icon on the screen, this light bulb, and it's going to show you some of those neuroinclusion tips for you to take with you and test out in your workplace. Additionally, if you stay until the end, you'll receive a free 30-minute one-on-one session with me, where we'll walk through your teams and your own executive functioning skills. You'll receive improved awareness as well as immediate thoughts and potential tips and strategies that may help to stick with and apply within that free session. So before we begin, let's just have some of these community agreements. I like to do this every time that I get together in a group like this. So I'd love for everyone to mute your microphone, which I think we already have set up, but turn your camera on if possible. It's really helpful for me to gauge people's expressions and reactions through this training. So it's nonverbal communication. If you have any questions during this training, please type them in the chat and I'll make sure to get to them when we pause a couple times throughout. And then this one should be obvious, but make sure to be respectful. My team is going to be monitoring the chat and we'll remove anybody who's not playing nice today. So I'm Stina with Keymaker Services. I am the performance coach and productivity expert using my training as a neurodiversity and neuroinclusion specialist to unlock the power of your employees. Since you're here with me today, you get that fast access link to my calendar to book a free strategy call with me, and my team is sending that link into the chat now. You're here today because something piqued your interest surrounding productivity, employee retention, or neurodiversity. So I'm curious which of these 3 areas piqued your interest the most. Please respond in the poll that should be popping up right now. Of those 3, which one drew you in? I'm going to say Avery, if you can, because I am not seeing when we're doing these, it's not popping up with my results. So maybe just throw it in the chat so I can see how it comes out. Okay. So, all right, 42% productivity, 17 employee retention, and then 42% neurodiversity. So the exciting part is that all 3 of these topics are connected. So as we talk through them, we're going to address all of them. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, operating from this same perspective, I'm going to go through the definitions that we're functioning with. So let's briefly cover neurodiversity, neurodivergent, neurotypical, and neuroinclusion, all the neuros, and how we see neurodiversity here at Keymaker Services. So neurodiversity is the recognition that everyone, regardless of diagnosis or being neurodivergent, has a unique brain that works differently from everyone else's. You learn differently, you communicate differently, you have different needs and different strengths. Neuroinclusion is the recognizing that this actually is leveraging it to make us more effective as individuals and as teams. The data shows that neurodiversity awareness revolutionizes workplaces, unleashes potential, enhances decision-making. But what does that actually look like? The current data shows us that using neuroinclusive strategies leads to an increase in employee productivity, engagement, and retention. So to calculate how these numbers impact your team or company, you can use that same scheduling link in the chat, and we can walk through the specifics together for your situation and your team's situation. Just like with any process, there is a formula that provides the desired result. And there's definitely one for multiplying productivity in teams and employee retention using neuroinclusion as the main ingredient. So let's get you all started in this. A really cool outcome of neuroinclusion is unlocking those hidden skills. So when these skills are identified, developed, we see cost reduction and efficiency gains. So I'm going to have you do some engagement with me again. So this is very logical. And if you're in agreement with that, I want you to throw up an L with your hand at the camera. Waiting for it. Then I see a couple folks. I want to encourage you, you're going to move that L away from your forehead because we're not doing loser, we're doing L for logical. Right? It's always our tendency. We learned that. So pull it away. We're doing logical. And for our first takeaway, we have flexible work arrangements. So allowing for employee-directed flexible work schedules and remote work options, we can remove those barriers to peak performance. This could mean working from home. It can be allowing employee-directed breaks or seeking input on scheduling of meetings that's in accordance with the overlap of each employee's peak productivity hour, which I will get into a little bit further, but this is essential when you're using this too. And before we continue, let's take a pause for any questions that may have come up because those definitions were thrown at you. If you think of any right now, feel free to add them into the chat. So one would be, aren't neurodiverse and neurodivergent the same? So the difference between neurodivergent, neurodiverse, and neurodiversity is that neurodiversity includes that entire spectrum of neurotypical and neurodivergent. Those are the polar ends of it. Neurodiversity is the overarching. So neurodivergent and neurotypical is part of the neurodiversity spectrum. So figuring out what the most productive hours are, you have to do some self-observation or take observations from outside in, but really noting what hours of your day are you really engaged, you have high attention, you can produce, and then tracking that over time. That's one way. And then when you're looking at teams, you want to have that in comparison. So you might have different individuals on your team where like Tuesdays from 10 to 1 they're on fire. But that's not going to necessarily be the same with maybe the managing partner or managing team member. And you want to, when you're assigning those tasks, you pick those key points, those key areas, and have them doing the task completion then. And then when you do meetings, you want to do it outside of those because meetings are more engaging. So you're having this like input output that's happening. And that's going to help with using the whole day versus getting it off where you're thinking 9 a.m. everybody's going to be on point and ready to go. That's not the reality of how our nervous system and our brains work at all. Okay, so what do we mean by neurodivergent people unlocking hidden skills? Neurodivergent folks and folks who maybe are unaware of their nervous system needs aren't going to be performing in their true ability without being given options. So what we don't know, we can't use. So creating that environment so that they have options or even suggestions that are going to help support their nervous system. And so that they can tap into that true ability. Like a really good example would be someone that doesn't recognize that they're more sensitive to auditory stimulus and their system is using this the whole day to try to regulate and manage their attention unnecessarily. And that's wasted energy just because of unawareness. Sensory, what are some examples of sensory overload that happens? Definitely auditory, some visual stimulus. When your system gets overstimulated, it starts to go into shutdown. You're not going to be able to think as clearly. You're not going to be able to communicate as clearly. It's kind of, you have a lot of similar experiences like you might think of like with anxiety. So you might feel tingling in your fingers and your toes, and you have this thought and you can't quite spit it out so that you're communicating it clearly to the other person. And that's extremely frustrating. And that can be something where you just need to go back and do a reset for your nervous system and let it recover so then you can re-engage. All right. We're going to stop again in a little bit, but I'm going to keep going. So how do we know that this really works, neuroinclusion? Well, we know this because there are businesses that are already benefiting from this process. Examples are SAP and the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise are both industry leaders in best practices for turning neurodivergent talent into tangible results for the company. At SAP, a great example that they've shared is how one single neurodivergent employee was responsible for creating a solution that saved the company $40 million. And let's think 1 in 5 people are neurodivergent. This is a common stat. So now picture what this looks like for your company. And for those of us that don't really like doing mental math, which is totally me, you're going to pull out a calculator. I'm going to ask you to do this right now. So just if you don't know the exact number, guess. What's the total number of employees in your company? You're going to divide that number by 5. Now type that number into the chat. This shows how many of your employees, whether you know that they're neurodivergent or not, are likely not reaching their full potential. So just think of all of you, if you had all your neurodivergent employees, whether they know they are or not, were actually leveraged and supported. That's an incredible impact on the company's success. And I know that you want that impact. So to get to an expert's perspective on how neuroinclusion can foster innovation in your organization, you can also use that scheduling link in the chat and meet with me, and we can calculate it out for your specific situation. We've all heard, and I think we all can agree, that actions speak louder than words. So what can we do to put this into action? We have 3 examples that you might look at. The first is inclusive hiring practices. And that could be asking candidates if they need accommodations during the hiring process. It could be creating safe spaces, which might be a leader willing to be the example of self-accommodation. So let's say a leader comes in and they, at the beginning of a meeting, and they're voicing, hey, gosh, there's this construction happening nearby and it's really distracting. And then they go and they model and they put in headphones or they put in noise reducing earplugs. This is an example of creating a safe space because we're modeling it for those that we're leading or normalizing it. Let's look at a past example for adaptability in policies, the experience of COVID. Many companies have adjusted their attendance policy to no longer requiring physical presence in the office. If people didn't feel safe coming to work, they wouldn't be productive, so the policy has changed. We can use that same thought process. If we don't feel safe at work, we need to change our policy. So here comes another poll. Which of these 3 examples is your company already doing? Inclusive hiring practices, creating safe spaces, adaptability, and policies. And then once we have that poll, oh, thank you, Avery. I'm seeing 38 of inclusive hiring practices, 67 creating safe spaces, 11% adaptability and policies. So for our second takeaway, let's take inclusive hiring practices and broaden our lens to recognize the importance of all diversity and inclusion efforts. So I want you to think about this. All types of diversity are interconnected. So whether you bring in a racial equity consultant or hire a keynote speaker on gender pay gap, we're moving in the right direction. Ultimately, all of these diversity efforts cultivate a culture of acceptance and celebration of difference, which neuroinclusive work requires. We're teaching thinking, we're changing thought processes. So for a lot of us, anytime we've heard neurodiversity, we think of people being diagnosed with autism, OCD, ADHD. These are common occurrences of where our thought goes. What is missed there is that everyone's diverse cognitive profile holds untapped potential. So getting bogged down in how this translates to medical records is simply not helpful. We want to look at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is that everyone's brain works differently. Diversity in our brains and our nervous systems is a given. Defining how these differences play out is a discovery, and it's leveraged for success when we're actively embracing this diversity amongst our teams and actually changing the way we work based on what we learn. So now in this poll, to see what we may be already doing to address neurodiversity amongst our teams, is there a personalized coaching offered that provides performance advice that's tailored to the unique employee? Is there a culture of learning where curiosity, empathy, and self-reflection are encouraged? Are processes adjusted regularly to modify tasks and projects according to how employees work? Okay. We've got personalized coaching, some of that going on, 11%. Cultural learning. So we have some of that cultural learning. It's really more split between cultural learning and process adjustments. Nothing at 22%. So we know this is something that needs attention, needs some love and development. So when looking to increase productivity and retention, diverse thinking is essential. We know that acknowledgement of the nervous system and diversity within how folks process and communicate information significantly impacts our productivity as a whole. So there needs to be that right amount of stimulus to the nervous system to activate engagement in a topic or a thought. There also needs to be, there can't be too much stimulus to overwhelm that nervous system to send us into that individual shutdown, or what I call it freeze, where very little is accomplished and thought is slow and it's labor intensive to even get the thought out. High productivity lives in this Goldilocks space where it's just right amounts of stimulus. The Goldilocks just right level is achieved through practices of awareness and environment management. And when folks feel that they're in an environment where there is a likelihood of success and that they will perform well, they're able to demask, drop their guard enough to share out diverse and innovative ideas. So when people feel that they can be themselves and they can experience success in the same moments that they're showing their true selves, they're seen. And when people feel that their true selves are seen, are accepted, and they're safe, this feeds multiple areas of basic human needs. So we have of connection and belonging, of safety, of esteem, self-actualization, even physiologically, so access to food and shelter through creating that in this environment of our workplace. Anytime that you can provide for a basic human need, you create a draw. You install a building sense of commitment and of loyalty and stability in your employees and your team. And with this, you gain retention and commitment, which is both beneficial to the company culture and the company's wallet. And that's why this is so crucial to consider at that upper management level. So in the chat, type yes or no. Do you feel like your company's upper management has a handle on best practices in this area? Wow. I've yet to see a yes, or even like a little. I'm seeing just no's. We're in that black and white here. So let's look at another artifact to support inclusive practices. Continuing in that same vein of team members feeling seen, heard, and valued. In 2018, Deloitte put a report out that stated companies with inclusive cultures are 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile. So let's imagine the impact of these 2 characteristics, innovative and agile, on your own company team. If your company is innovative, it's going to be able to create solutions when faced with challenges and changes in the market, in the employee candidate pool, in the ebbs and flows of business. When your company is agile, you're going to be able to pivot and with ease when faced with unpredictables, like a pandemic, like the dips and upticks in business, like policy changes. These are key to business survival and success. And what's super cool is that they're naturally manifesting within a neurodivergent brain and experienced through neuroinclusive practices. So a great example of this is the concept of neuroentrepreneurship. It's in which we know that like entrepreneurs experience higher connectivity between the area of the brain associated with cognitive flexibility and the part that's responsible for exploring choices. So what this means is that they have greater cognitive flexibility and they're able to alternate effectively between this exploration area and this exploitation with ease. And this brings us to that third takeaway. Creating diverse problem-solving teams is essential. You can do this across departments, but bringing together people across that neurodiversity spectrum, so from that neurotypical to that neurodivergent and all in between, is essential when striving for innovative thinking. So again, let's take a moment to check in and see if anyone has any questions. I'll look at the ones that are already put in and typed, but feel free to add any more now. How do you know when your nervous system is dysregulated? Yeah. So I think about when you're struggling to piece thoughts together, like when you start having that fragment, that can be a sign that you're becoming dysregulated. Again, like that noting of that tingling in your extremities, your heart rate spiking, you feel, sometimes you feel lethargic or maybe unable to communicate clearly. If we don't know if they're neurodiverse, how do we build a diverse problem-solving team? Well, the great thing is that you don't need disclosure to be neuroinclusive. We don't need people to out themselves, or we don't need to request that, because what we do is if we are providing for the nervous systems of all with these best practices, it's going to amplify everybody's ability. So if you look at it and you say, I want to make sure that there are options for regulating auditory stimulus, visual stimulus. I want to make sure that I ask these questions. How do you work best? Do you need time that you're interacting in a team and you need some solo time? What's your strengths when it comes to executive functioning skills? So doing some of those assessments, those self-observation questionnaires and starting that conversation, that can be modeled also. So a leader can say, hey, I know that I need to use X tool to get through this type of task. What do you normally use for this type of task? So this is all information and just having conversations that you can use. And it's going to be something that it applies to everybody. And so what's good for a neurodivergent person, what's good for the nervous system is good for the nervous system, period. All right. Okay. I know I just missed some. So what was the difference between neurodivergent and neurotypical? So neurotypical is, and this one's hard for me too, because neurotypical to me feels like the word normal. And to me, that sounds like a setting on the dryer. So neurotypical would be what we would say is not neurodivergent. Neurodivergent is more of what those diagnoses would go under. So if neurodivergent would be like, I've identified that I have ADHD or autism or OCD, a learning disability, that's on one spectrum. And then the other spectrum is neurotypical, where the belief that there's none of that is happening. And then does your work focus more on one-on-one coaching or working across teams? So the focus really, the greatest impact is when we can do it as a team. Because, in order to do it as a team, we also have to be doing it in ourselves and one-on-one. So it has to be a combination of both as the needs present themselves. We do offer one-on-one coaching. A lot of times that's something that we focus on within the team, the leader or the team leader or the team manager, because it trickles down, or a champion within the team is really ideal with that. But both are options. All right, There we go. So Keymaker's model is proven to be successful. It's based on scientific data, evidence from case studies, and reports. It also nods to other change models that you may have already interacted with. So let's go through each step together. First would be awareness. So awareness of self, of those around you, awareness of the current environment, awareness of what I like to call areas of potential growth. Where can I get better? And then what are you and your team losing out on? And how do you get it? Step 2 is purpose, to discover the benefits of addressing the problem and identify the gains. Step 3 is foundation. So start laying that foundation based in data. Utilize your experts to guide you through. Step 4 is practice. So taking the learnings and guidance from data and from those experts to create that desired outcome. And the last step, step 5, is independence. So the team has integrated these practices and methods, and the team is able to autonomously apply these changes and sustain them. Having individual and team awareness is essential for understanding where gaps and inefficiencies exist. A Deloitte study on JP Morgan Chase's neurodiversity initiative showed 90 to 140% higher productivity levels than their counterparts, and consistently delivered error-free work, as well as reports from executives of increased retention and productivity for both neurodivergent and neurotypical employees. So if you could make this happen for you, your team, your company, would you do it? You're going to throw that in the chat. Because I think this should be an obvious one, but let's go ahead and answer anyways. Yes or no? All right, I like seeing all those yeses. Step 2, purpose. There has to be a reward, a benefit to everything that we do. We are purpose-driven creatures, and we naturally want to assign a meaning to each action, or we don't do it. So in addition to already increasing productivity, improving company culture, now we have the example of EY's experience with neurodiversity initiatives directly linked to the company's wallet and profit. EY developed a neurodiversity center of excellence to seek out and leverage neurodiverse talent. The result was a positive impact on the firm ranging from 300 to 500 million bucks. So your company, your team has this potential for growth and profits and innovation when you develop a neuroinclusive approach to your workplace. So in the chat, if your company, so I'm going to have you do a little bit more thinking than yes or no's. If your company committed today to cultivate a neuroinclusive workplace 1 year from now, so now in 1 year, what would be the greatest benefit you would feel in your own work? What would the outcome that would be be the most important, the most impactful to you? How would this look? How would this feel? So keeping a hold on that, on the best talent, right? So if people are given what they need to succeed, and then they see areas where they can actually grow, they're going to stick around. Hidden, yep, unleash the potential is hidden. Definitely see that energy boost. I also think if you're struggling to think, you can totally take one that come to my mind if it resonates. So to be part of a company that is recognized for innovation, to feel like my coworkers and leaders actually understand me. And also the trust. So trust that my company that I'm in is where I can actually grow. Efficient, perfect, yep. Love these answers. So for building a foundation in an initiative, it's best to use what we know about human behavior related to growth and change. So to do this, it's important to pull from scientific data. You also want to pull from data gathered on site, so in a specific situation and environment, and from experts. So you and the company, you do what you do best in your expertise. But I'm guessing that you don't have the time or the right person to spearhead this type of effort. So to build the foundation for a new neuroinclusive practices, to multiply productivity, to increase retention, to amplify profits and savings, you need an expert that has the knowledge, the techniques, and the experience. Keymaker unlocks the power of your employees through neuroinclusion. And so to start that foundation of your company, you can still click that link in the chat to schedule. So let's get to the last steps in the process. So the last steps in the process are to take that newly gained knowledge and skills and apply them in a sustainable manner. So although I am a pretty badass fisherwoman, I will say, we do not believe in stringing you along like a fish on a hook and wearing you out. Even though that is the best, right? You just wear them down, then you bring it in. But all of Keymaker's services are designed for gradual release from high scaffolding to none, for you to experience tangible improvement and for those improvements to be maintainable independently, and for you to move on without our services. So you're doing it on your own. So another question for you all, are you ready to unlock the power of your employees through neuroinclusion? You type yes or no in the chat. To see change, to boost productivity, to retain your employees. I love the for sure. Yes, lots of yeses. I love that we're on the same page. All right, so give you even more value related to neuroinclusion is the impact on the company wallet. So given a traditional 8-hour workday, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that folks are realistically productive 2 hours and 53 minutes of those 8 hours. That means that 64% of money and time is wasted every day. So for example, if you take an employee paid at $45 an hour, that's producing 36% of the time, that's $230.40 a day wasted, $1,152 wasted in a week. If we multiply that by the 260 work days a year, that's $59,904 wasted in 1 year for one employee. So that nearly $60,000 of your labor cost is not producing the necessary output for your business. That's for one single employee. So multiply that by the number of employees you have. That's like a huge yikes. We at Keymaker Services are passionate and take pride in what we do. We love it. And part of our secret sauce is that we focus on skills and action. So for example, you would want to identify the precise time of day, environment, structure for peak performance and for focus for each individual on your team. Imagine what you could do with that information. By investing in neurodiversity awareness training, you could convert those 2 hours and 53 minutes into 4 hours and 16 minutes of productive work every day. So given that same example of the employee paid $45 an hour, before neurodiversity awareness training is $33,000 worth of quality work time, becomes nearly $50,000 of quality work time for the same employee after receiving neurodiversity awareness training like Keymaker Services. This means for each employee, the company can gain back $16,000 of wasted money from unproductive work time. So simply by investing in neuroinclusion training, we're multiplying this $16K by the number of employees in your company. What are the numbers you're getting? And I'm actually really curious. So do you have your calculators out? Take that number times 16K and throw it in the chat. I mean, I just think when I've done this with companies, with business owners, with leaders, it's incredible how this adds up. Yeah, it's like millions. So we're already at this winding down time, and I wanted to definitely hold space for more questions and kind of more interactive chat here. Oh my goodness, I just saw another huge number come into the chat. So can you believe we're already here at that see you later time? So one favor I'm going to ask of all of you is if you could pull your phones out or go to the link. I would love feedback from me. I have really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you've enjoyed starting it. And I hope that you'd love to continue this discussion.